Before evil existed, and long before the first human set foot on earth, the heavens were ruled by infinite goodness. In heaven, everything was perfect. There was no pain or darkness, and everything responded to God's perfect will. But then God with his own hands shaped his most beautiful creation, a being of unmatched beauty, a glorious cherub charged with guarding the throne of God and leading all the armies of light. God gave him unparalleled strength and wisdom that no other angel possessed and called him Lucifer, the bearer of light. Lucifer was the seal of perfection, the most beautiful, the wisest, the being closest to God, and the most like him. His voice was music, and his form was like pure fire. Clothed in precious stones, he walked among the burning coals of God's throne. He was God's masterpiece, the most glorious of all created beings, and all the angels gazed upon him in wonder. But within the most perfect heart, the first shadow was born: pride. Lucifer stopped looking at his creator and began looking at himself. His own beauty blinded him. His power corrupted him. And in the silence of his heart, a terrible thought grew: the desire for God's throne. I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God, and I will make myself like the Most High. And so the first sin was neither murder nor a lie. It was pride. The most beautiful of angels became the prince of darkness, the source of all the world's evil and suffering. Lucifer became the first traitor, and with him he dragged down a third of the angels, sowing darkness throughout the kingdom of heaven. From then on, he would no longer be called Lucifer. His new name would be Satan. This is the story of how the most glorious angel who ever existed, God's most beautiful creation, became corrupted until he turned into his eternal enemy. Because Lucifer's greatest battle was against himself, against the fire of envy and pride that consumed him from within until it broke him. Before God created Lucifer, heaven was a perfect symphony. The angels arranged in choirs and ranks moved in flawless harmony. High above, like living flames, the seraphim sang and worshipped God without ceasing. Their voices were like the thunder of 1,000 waterfalls, and their praise echoed throughout all creation. Below them, the cherubim guarded divine secrets, surrounded by light and mystery, guardians of God's glory. But something was about to change forever. Within this perfect order, God desired to do something extraordinary. As the morning star, he sculpted with his own hands his most beautiful work. With the power of his word and the fire of his spirit, the Creator not only shaped a guardian cherub, he took pleasure in him. He delighted in his beauty and rejoiced in his perfection. Scripture describes it this way: "You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adorned you." God adorned him with splendor. Onyx, jasper, sapphire, and emerald covered his being like a mantle of glory. His voice resonated like celestial music, and his light was so intense that no other angel could compare to him. Lucifer didn't merely reflect God's light. He himself blazed like a sun in the heavens. He was God's creation closest to perfection, designed to be an eternal guide, protector, and worshiper. The Lord raised him up as commander of the armies of light, first among his creatures, and named him Lucifer, the morning star, the bearer of light. Lucifer was placed on God's holy mountain, walking among the stones of fire in the very presence of the Most High. He was the priest of the celestial sanctuary, guardian of God's glory. Under his command were entire legions of angels who looked upon him with admiration and obedience. He was the strongest in power, the most brilliant in intelligence, the highest in glory. The seraphim and cherubim hung on his every word, and even Michael, the great warrior, admired his wisdom. Lucifer organized the heavenly choirs, directing praises toward the Creator with fervor and passion. But he also spent much of his time in the most sacred place in all the universe, beside God's throne. There, amid the stones of fire, he gazed upon the eternal radiance of the Almighty. It was an incomparable honor, a holy mission. But in that very holy place, something strange began to grow within him. A silent seed started taking root deep in his heart. At first, it was barely a thought, a shadow that seemed to fade amid so much light. But that spark returned and returned again until it became a hidden fire. Lucifer began to look at himself. No longer did he see only God's glory, but the greatness of his own beauty, and he marveled at the brilliance of his own light. Every time the legions of angels admired him, he felt power coursing through his being. And in the silence of guarding the throne, he began to wonder, why not me? Why can't I occupy that throne everyone worships? Why surrender when the splendor of perfection dwells within me? At first, it was a barely perceptible spark, a fleeting thought. Lucifer asked himself, what if my light could shine higher? What if my glory didn't always need to serve another? They were small questions, almost invisible, but they grew like poisonous seeds. In the silence of his thoughts, he began to imagine himself on high, seated on the throne, being praised. And each time he fulfilled his duties, that voice inside him grew stronger. But the angels began to sense his change. Lucifer was becoming increasingly distant, enigmatic. His light, once warm, now burned with coldness.
Lucifer, brother, what burden weighs upon your heart? Your light grows restless. Lucifer looked at him and replied, perhaps there are things that even we cannot understand, dear Gabriel. The answer clarified nothing, yet confirmed everything. A chill ran through Gabriel.
Day after day, Lucifer began to neglect his duties. Once he had led the songs of heaven, his voice the most beautiful of all. But over time, his voice began to fade. Lucifer showed up only half-heartedly, lifting his gaze with pride and irritation, and the other angels could tell something was wrong.
And then Lucifer began to speak quietly with certain angels, posing to them the same question that consumed him. Is not your light magnificent? Why must you serve another and not yourself? God had given everyone free will, the most precious and dangerous gift of all.
Some, dazzled by his greatness, started listening closely to his words and began following him without saying it aloud, as if his light was guiding them toward a new path.
Lucifer, does singing no longer bring you joy? And Lucifer, with a cold smile, replied, perhaps I found other horizons, my friend. Perhaps there's something beyond what we've known.
And many angels listened to his words with devotion. The angels weren't innocent souls. They were wise, strong, and pure. Yet Lucifer drew them in. And he didn't do it with lies or empty promises. Lucifer spoke with power, with conviction, and with a vision so compelling that many followed him and began to believe what he said. Lucifer didn't present himself as an enemy, but as a brilliant leader, as someone worthy of being followed. And we must not forget Lucifer was God's greatest creation. His beauty, his voice, his intelligence, everything came from God. But instead of using those gifts to serve, he began to think he deserved to be worshipped.
That's when the great rift in heaven began. One day God called Lucifer to speak privately and said to him with love and patience, Lucifer, my son, the seal of perfection, I sense your thoughts are drifting away from me. Ideas are beginning to grow in your heart that separate you from the eternal.
But Lucifer looked at the Creator and replied, Father, didn't you create me to understand and explore? There's nothing I desire more than to comprehend the depth of your work. Is that wrong?
The Lord's sadness ran deep, but he held back. His heart, vast and patient, understood the fragility of the freedom he himself had given. He knew that seeds of pride could sprout even in the purest soil.
So God answered him gently, Lucifer, your desire to understand is noble, but your thoughts are beginning to revolve around yourself. You've let yourself be seduced by the light I placed in you, and you forget that this light is a reflection of my love, not your own source.
Lucifer lowered his gaze, but inside a fire of misunderstanding and pride began to burn. My Lord, I've wanted nothing that isn't yours. My light is the gift you gave me. How could I turn away from you when I was made by your own will?
God looked at him with eyes of infinite tenderness. He knew that deep down, Lucifer was beginning to see the beauty of his own glory as an end in itself. He hadn't sinned yet, but his love was growing cold.
God, filled with mercy, reached out his hand to him and said, "My son, remember where all light comes from. Don't let your heart be wrapped in shadows. If you turn to me, your splendor will grow in truth, and together, we will be even greater than any solitary thought."
But Lucifer, instead of feeling peace, felt a sting in his pride. It was a discomfort he could barely understand. But there it was. Didn't God trust his ability to remain faithful? Why so many warnings? He withdrew with a bow, but inside him an invisible distance was growing. As the days passed, his desire to understand and explore continued to consume his attention. He no longer paused to contemplate God with the same devotion. The angels continued worshiping him, and his voice still led the choirs, but his heart was divided.
Once again, God called Lucifer and said with sorrow, "Lucifer, I have seen the path you are taking, and it pains me. Your light, which was once so bright, is turning into shadow. Your goodness is fading. There is still time, my son. If you choose to return to me, the love in your heart will bloom again."
But this time, Lucifer refused to listen. His heart had sought only his own satisfaction to feel great and powerful. In his mind, he began searching for reasons to justify his evil thoughts.
And God, in his infinite patience, let him go. But first, he gave him his final warning. "I will not turn away from you, but you are free to choose your own path." God's sorrow was immense, knowing he would lose his most beautiful creation. But Lucifer's choice had to be respected, even if it meant his downfall. Soon, something momentous would unfold in heaven. A revelation that would test all celestial beings, especially Lucifer. And God, in his infinite wisdom, delayed that moment and warned him, "My son, a great revelation approaches, and when it comes, the winds will be fierce. The tensions in your heart will rage like a storm tearing through the heavens. You must prepare yourself. You must root yourself in obedience, for the trial will be severe."
He wanted to give Lucifer time to prepare, to grow in humility, to strengthen the loyalty in his heart. Lucifer listened earnestly, kneeling before God, gazing at him with devotion. And his voice, soft yet firm, rose from the depths of his being. "Father, whatever the test may be, I desire to be obedient to your commands."
And he wasn't lying. Lucifer spoke from the deepest part of his heart, for within his soul burned a genuine desire to remain faithful. But at the same time, in a dark corner of his mind, the seed of pride continued to grow. He wanted to be the most important, even greater than God. And each day that desire took deeper hold of his mind. Even so, the Lord gave him another chance and once again delayed the great revelation in heaven, giving him more time to change, to draw near, to seek humility in his heart. But the moment came when the waiting had to end. He also had to consider the rest of the celestial beings, not just Lucifer. That day, God called them all together, both the great and small angels, for a grand assembly that filled all of heaven with light. A reverent silence fell. It seemed as though all of heaven held its breath.
Then the light of God's presence shone brighter than ever before, and his voice like gentle thunder was heard everywhere. "I will create a material universe, a place where life will flourish, a place that will reflect my love and my glory in a new way."
And then before all the angels, God revealed his plan. Stars, galaxies, planets spinning in perfect harmony. And among those worlds, there was one very special one, Earth. There, life would bloom with breathtaking beauty. The angels watched in awe, their mouths agape. They felt immense joy seeing God's plans. It was something so new and fantastic that they could never have dreamed it.
But God wasn't finished. What he said next was even more astonishing. "I will not only create this universe there in that world, I will create beings in my own image and likeness. They will be called humans. They will be made of flesh and spirit, a blend of heaven and earth. And even more, in that very place I myself will become flesh. The second person of the Trinity, my Son, will take human form. His name will be Jesus Christ. And through that humanity, you will worship me."
A silence so profound fell over heaven that you could feel it. God, the creator of everything, was asking the angels to worship him in a new way in the form of a man, his son, Jesus Christ. He was asking them to kneel not only before his power as God, but also before a human face. fragile and humble. But that wasn't all. God also revealed what would happen in the future, that humanity, despite being created by Him, would stray and become corrupted. And God Himself in Jesus Christ would sacrifice Himself for them, dying, crucified out of love. At this, everyone reacted with amazement. Everyone except one. Lucifer couldn't accept what he was hearing. To him, it made no sense. The idea of having to kneel before a human being, of worshiping God in a weak body that could die, seemed utterly unacceptable to him. For ages, he had been the most beautiful, the closest to the throne, the Creator's masterpiece. Why hadn't he been the chosen one? Lucifer felt that his beauty, his power, and his intelligence made him worthy of that honor. But instead of choosing him, God had decided to make himself small, to become a man. And this thought filled Lucifer with a bitter feeling. That bitterness grew in his heart like a serpent, extinguishing all the love and respect he had felt for his Creator.
No. Don't you realize this is a mistake? Can't you see that what God asks of us is absurd? He asks us to worship an inferior form, to bend our knees before mortal flesh. This is not glory, this is humiliation. We are not the ones who are wrong. It is God who has failed, who has taken the wrong path. Why should we bow before something inferior to us? We who were made of pure light should occupy a higher place, not lower ourselves.
The angels listened in confusion. Lucifer's words seemed to make sense. They were logical, and some even began to doubt. His speech had a seductive logic, a convincing force that penetrated their minds like a gentle poison.
Who is like God? Who is like God?
With just 3 words, Michael had answered every one of Lucifer's arguments, exposing the fatal flaw in his logic. It was a cry of humility, of absolute recognition that no one, not even Lucifer, could compare to God. No one possessed his power, his wisdom, or his love. The angels trembled. Michael's words, so simple and direct, awakened something within them, reminding them who they were, where they came from, and to whom they owed their existence. They saw themselves clearly once again for what they truly were, beings created by a perfect God.
You are consumed by pride. Your light, Lucifer, has turned to darkness. You're trying to extinguish God's light. Can't you see that you're placing yourself above Him?
Lucifer felt a piercing pain deep within. Michael's words revealed a truth he didn't want to face. He realized that his pride and his desire to be supreme were being laid bare. Everyone saw him now. Stripped of all his excuses, humiliated, he looked at Michael with contempt, trying to stand firm. But something in what he had heard was burning him from within.
You understand nothing. Are you so blind that you can't see what's being asked of us is humiliation? I, who was first in His glory, cannot kneel before something so inferior?
You don't understand love, Lucifer. This isn't about humiliation, but about love. God becomes flesh for us, and you reject it because you can't bear to be lesser. You've forgotten your place. You've forgotten that everything you are is a reflection of His glory. It's not God who lowers Himself. It's your pride that elevates you beyond your own being.
Lucifer felt he could no longer bear to hear more, and without a word, he turned around and withdrew. Proud on the outside, but inside his heart burned with a rage he couldn't control. Alone, Lucifer wept, not tears of sadness, but of pure rage. How dare Michael? How dare he challenge him, the brightest of all?
Don't you see that God asks the impossible of us? He asks us to renounce what we are, to kneel before an inferior form. Why should we humble ourselves, we who were made of light, for something made of clay?
Lucifer is right. God cannot ask us to do something that defies logic. What if God isn't truly God? What if he's just a very powerful angel? What if he's just a kind of Lucifer, only bigger?
He spoke of dignity, of the greatness of their existence and their right to preserve it. He spoke of freedom, of being unbound, of choosing their own path. He told them they could become more than what they had been until now. And he promised them a different heaven where no one would have to kneel before another, where each would be valued for their own light and talents. God has given us free will, so why not use it? Why not be who we truly are?
With each gathering, more angels followed him. His army grew, and these weren't ordinary angels. They were the most beautiful, the wisest, and the most powerful. They were those to whom God had given the greatest beauty and ability.
We are the future. We are the light that refuses to bow down. We will not let our essence be extinguished beneath the shadow of an inferior form. If God won't give us the place we deserve, then we'll take that place ourselves.
And then the battle erupted with a fury that shook the very foundations of heaven. The war between good and evil, between light and darkness.
With every strike, with every clash between angels, heaven trembled, and the entire universe seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the outcome of a war that would change everything.
It's your pride, Lucifer, that has blinded you, and it's not my light that will stop you, Lucifer. It's the will of God, the light of truth, justice, and order that you cannot corrupt. This war is over.
Suddenly, a radiance so brilliant it seemed to pierce through all of heaven burst forth on the horizon, an intense light that eclipsed all others, leaving every angel stunned. The darkness began to shatter, and Lucifer fell to his knees. His body was broken by the power of divine light. His angels, seeing his fall, surrendered, unable to continue the fight without their leader. The battle was over.
By the power of God, fall, Lucifer.
Then Lucifer was cast into the abyss, and with him all the angels who had fought by his side fell too. That day, a third of all heaven's angels were thrown into darkness, falling like banished meteors into exile. Suddenly, heaven fell silent, a profound silence heavy with the sorrow of an irreparable loss. The war left a wound, a scar that only love and time could heal. The angels who had remained faithful were weary and sorrowful, but they knew that truth, faith, and hope had prevailed. With this victory, heaven understood a truth that never changes. Good always conquers evil, because good comes from God, and God is light, a light no darkness can extinguish. In the abyss, Lucifer took on a new name. He ceased to be an angel of light and became Satan, the enemy of God. At first, he felt a sadness so profound, it was as if a burning iron seared him from within. No physical pain could compare to what it meant to be completely separated from God and His love. But instead of repenting, he felt hatred, and that hatred became a new purpose. If he couldn't reach God's glory, then he would destroy it. In this abyss of despair, his gaze turned toward creation, toward the material world that God had promised to make. In his twisted mind, a thought took shape. If he couldn't have heaven, he would corrupt God's most precious work, humanity. And there his darkest desire was born to harm mankind. In his warped thinking, he believed that if humans fell into darkness, it would be like dragging a piece of heaven down with him into the abyss. He envied and resented them because God had created them to occupy a very special place, a place he had lost. For this reason, he would do everything possible to turn them away from God. Satan wasn't just seeking to do evil for evil's sake. He wanted to attack what God loved most, and he knew that if he could harm humanity, he would wound the Creator's heart. From that moment on, evil began to exist, not merely as an absence of goodness, but as an active and organized force. The expulsion of Lucifer and his army of fallen angels had, therefore, a direct consequence on the balance of good and evil in the world. The demons with Satan at their head began searching for ways to exert their influence over the material world to corrupt human beings, to incite pride, envy, and despair, the very feelings that had led to their own downfall. And the Lord in His love and justice allowed this to happen. Casting them out of heaven wasn't just punishment, it was an act of justice. The angels who chose to rebel against God's love could no longer dwell with Him. God's love never left, but His justice demanded balance. Those who had chosen to reject the light could no longer bask in it. In this act, the balance between God's love and justice was perfectly revealed. Justice required separation, while love still granted the fallen the freedom to exist, though in a darkness of their own choosing. His first great act was in the Garden of Eden, the place where God in His infinite love had begun the story of humanity. In that perfect garden, Lucifer saw an opportunity to tear away the innocence of the first human beings, Adam and Eve, and make them the first victims of his rebellion against the Creator. He observed how God had given man only one command: "You may freely eat from every tree in the garden, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat from it, you will surely die." The tree of the knowledge of good and evil was a sign that they could make decisions, that they had the freedom to choose. Adam and Eve also had free will, the ability to choose between good and evil. And Lucifer, now Satan, saw his great opportunity.
Has God really said, "You shall not eat from any tree in the garden? You will not die." For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.
With a single temptation, Satan achieved what he had planned from the abyss to separate creation from its Creator, to bring the heavenly conflict into the human heart. And he did it with the same desire that consumed him to be like God. Free will is God's most precious gift. The ability He gives us to make our own choices. We can choose to love and obey Him, or we can choose not to. This gift, the freedom to choose, was what made the fall possible. Both in heaven with Lucifer and on earth with Adam and Eve, pride was the problem. But Satan didn't stop there. He witnessed the birth of Jesus Christ, and his hatred grew like never before. He remembered that he hadn't been the one chosen by God, but rather this human child, fragile and imperfect. He watched and waited until Jesus was at his weakest moment to corrupt him. One day, he saw Jesus being baptized, and the Spirit led him into the wilderness, where he spent 40 days and 40 nights without food or water fasting to draw closer to God. When Jesus had reached the very edge of his strength, Satan suddenly appeared before him. Jesus looked at him with an exhausted body but an unshakable spirit.
If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become bread.
It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God.
If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone.